Welcome to Directionally Correct, a People's podcast with Cole and Scott.
Today's guest, nobody.
Thanks to our sponsors, Worklytics. Generate actionable insights from work data while protecting your privacy using workplace analytics with our partners, Worklytics. What do you want to talk about today, man?
Boy, I haven't talked to you in a while. Just you and me one-on-one, right?
I know it's our filthy schedule. It just keeps pushing us around.
I think today we have some grab bag. So a bunch of little things we haven't gotten to before. We got a bit of nerdery, of course, as always. We got
As always.
We
should do a Waffle House to each other. I'm just realizing this. We've never done one for just you and I.
Let's do it. I don't see why we shouldn't do it.
All right, well, give us some time to think about it while the episode's going on.
We'll take a little break in the middle, but we also have an article from about performance and effort. But you want to start with like a little bit of recap of what we've seen in the past, like say 6 months or so?
Yeah. And I actually wanted to, as a part of that, make a quick announcement because we totally spaced on this when it happened, but we missed our 1-year anniversary with the Zach Love podcast. We forgot to announce that.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
We made it a year, especially doing a weekly. I mean, I don't know if people realize how much effort goes into this, but
yeah, people have no idea how much effort goes into this shamble of a podcast that we have.
So much effort into the pod, so little effort into the clothes that are worn on the pod.
I mean, they're basically the same clothes every week. You've got your Columbia or Patagonia shirt, and I've got my golf polos. I mean, we even put that in the agenda we send to guests. It's like full-size golf polos.
I should buy stock in Patagonia for sure.
Absolutely. But yeah, let's do a recap. So like our New Year's resolution one, or not New Year's, our New Year's episode that you and I did together, we did a recap of kind of the first 6 months of episodes that we had. And then we've got 6 more months now. So let's take a look back. I don't know. Well, maybe we could start, Scott, with, what was some of your like favorite people to talk to, like, or, favorite guests, did you have any conversations that particularly struck your fancy?
Oh, I mean, shout out to all the guests. I mean, I think that they all brought it. They were all good. It's super thankful for them volunteering their time to come on and talk to us. I really enjoyed talking to Michael Arena, Rob Cross, Conjar, Emily Pelosi. I'd already had a relationship with these people beforehand.
Yeah.
And it's great to talk to new people and meet them later. Like, we had the opportunity to talk to, say, Amit or some of these other folks, and I think it's a great way to just like socially connect with these people and just make more connections overall. Shout out to everybody. Rob Stilson, I hear you out there.
Yeah, Mr. Hare himself. I loved it. That was awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I walked away from all these like knowing people a little bit better in different ways. What about you, man?
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's interesting. Like, I love getting to know human beings and kind of like why they work. And I think that's why I went into biopsychology in the first place. But you really get like a next level layer doing this podcast for some reason. I don't know why. Like, if I just had a conversation with one of these people in the street, it wouldn't be sometimes as interesting as these. But I don't know. Some of the ones that I really liked a lot. I like the live ones. Those are fun.
Yeah,
it was really cool getting to talk to Nicholas Brimner at Talreos, and then Alexis at PsyOp, and just to like a little funny aside, because you can't really tell on video. But like one of the beauties of doing these live is I actually got to see like Alexis start blushing at times, which is like, it's so interesting. Like somebody you like look up to and seems like very like unachievable in terms of like who they are. And then you get to have a conversation with them and it's like, they start blushing. You're like, oh, this is still a human being, And so that's so freaking cool. But actually my favorite guest, and we do cite him quite often in terms of the research, it had to be Crede. So Marcus Crede was just such a freaking weird and epic episode. Like, weird, I love that one a lot.
Epic, enlightening, shocking, even.
Yeah.
All in a good way, too. All in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, he's saying like something like 40% of academic research is like crap. And I was like,
not crap, like,
dude.
Just straight made up.
Yeah, like just straight made up. And I was like, okay, I want to have more conversations like this, because these are kind of things you go to an academic conference, you read LinkedIn or you read journal, you just don't hear this kind of stuff. And I feel like it's like, some of these kind of things, these are the only conversations that are being had on these topics.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny you bring up like Alexis and Nicholas. I put these two as my highlights. As much as we have to work remotely with one another, having those live experiences is just so much better. I think that you mentioned Alexis blush during the actual pod. Nicholas, we got to have some beers with him at Talreos. It was so great. And like seeing like once again like Alexis blush when she did pick a number and it came up like, what would you do for love? And just out of randomly.
That was so freaking funny. Like I still have people have talked to me about that. But when like the thing with Nicholas, like people don't know, like we continued that after the podcast was over. We were hanging out for hours. You and I hung out for hours before the podcast, and then we were hanging out for hours afterwards with Nicholas. That was like one of the funnest things. But I don't know, in terms of highlights for me, and you mentioned her earlier, I thought it was so cool. We got to talk to Emily Pelosi, being the fact that I'm pretty sure she's the only person who's worked with both of us in one capacity or another. And it's just so interesting. And I think kind of along these lines, I know we had floated this idea out there. I don't know if it's actually going to happen or not, but like, what if we got to talk to both of like our first bosses on the podcast? like how crazy like would that be, and embarrassing likely, to have these kind of conversations. I know we've talked to Tillman before, who was both our advisor, and that was funny enough in itself.
Oh my God. Like, I mean, speaking of like some of the funniest moments like came from say like the live podcast that we did at La Tech. I found like some of the nerdery stuff we've gone into like probably the best sort of pod that we've done. Like at La Tech, we talked about toxoplasmosis, like essentially controlling workers' lives. I mean, I still think about that once a week. It is incredible.
I totally forgot about that. That's a crazy conversation. Yeah.
The quintessential directionally correct, right?
That is like, if you could bottle directionally correct, that was it.
I love the Ethan Burrows as well, when we talked about the Taliban hating their job. Now they have to do desk jobs. I love it.
The one I was really looking forward to the most ended up not being as funny, but I thought it was funny when I saw the article. Was more recent, was the IT worker who had been on sick leave for 15 years, and then was suing the company to get a raise. Like, dude, you haven't worked in 15 years, man. Like, why are you suing for a raise? But
that's gonna be a little sad, right? Like,
that one was a little sad, but the concept was funny, that's for sure.
We almost caused an East Coast West Coast battle at PSYOP, claiming that the West Coast was better than the East Coast.
Oh yeah, you said West Coast is the best coast. I want to quote that.
A nice boo from the crowd came up. That was intriguing.
I think that's our only boo we've had. best boos on the moment. I don't know. At least
publicly anyway, thus far.
Did you have anything like in the first 6 months of topics we should have talked about, or people or things we should have brought up with guests that we didn't get to?
I mean, like we've kind of covered like AI and this sort of thing ad nauseum, but I mean, there's more to come there for sure. It's not going to go away. It's only going to ramp up. I think return to office is still a big deal. We covered that a bit. We had some folks talking about sabermetrics and sports analytics and just different ways to apply it. I don't think we've covered many of the soft topics very well, culture, leadership, and this sort of thing. So, I mean, we'll look for some guests like that in the future.
Yeah, maybe we can hit some of those moments in the past, or in the future. I was thinking like we've cited Creday's research on a few other podcasts since his.
Oh yeah.
And even before his too. And I think a missed opportunity for me is like, what if we just had a Creday podcast and just covered Creday research on a Creday podcast? That would be epic.
Creday Day.
Exactly. It's like a girl's name who I went to high school with.
The mean streets of Monroe. I don't think we've had enough Johnny's Pizza talk. I think we need more Johnny's Pizza talk just so people understand.
I'll be honest. I think we've hit the Johnny's and actually, well, let's continue on that vein for just a second. So I did go back to Monroe recently, and I got some Johnny's pizza, and I gotta say, it holds up. It
Oh
definitely holds
man.
up. And
Oh
and I actually
man.
got the lunch buffet, which I haven't gotten in a long time because you have to be there at lunchtime to get it. And it was amazing. Like, and I got it with one of the graduate students at Tech, and they were just like in love just as much as I was, and it was a lot of fun.
I am so happy for y'all that y'all got to share that moment.
We got to bitch out about some other stuff, but that's not neither here nor there. Anyway, you wanna do a grab bag?
Oh, you want to do grab bag right now? Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
let's do
do
some
it.
grab bag. Why not?
Okay. So these are things that you and I will never get to because they're either smaller or just kind of ancillary or what have you. So throw them in the grab bag and we'll just, we'll see where it goes.
Well, can I kind of tee you up here a little bit just so it makes more sense, Scott?
Sure.
Because one of the things that I really appreciate about you on the podcast is you do a ton of behind the scenes work to find like really cool topics and articles to talk about. The problem that we have is we can't talk about everything,
We have
you
too
know, and so
many.
you find
Yeah.
something, it might be a little bit idiosyncratic or it doesn't really fit with like what we intend to talk about that week. And so it goes in, basically to avoid, well, let's talk about it,
Absolutely. We have a list a mile long of things that we'll never get to, and we have to constantly cull it down to
Mhm.
a list. But these are things that are fun, but we'll just never get to them otherwise. But in light of our 1 year anniversary, one thing you brought up probably on pod number one was the Flynn effect. And it's all about
Yeah.
the base rising up. And this article essentially says a full decade of the Flynn effect in America, the historical rise in trend of IQ can be explained by salt. So many men from Michigan and Wisconsin could not be drafted into the military because they had goiters on their neck. They literally couldn't fit into their military uniforms, right?
What?
And this Dr. David Cowie convinced the salt manufacturers, say like Morton Salt in my parents' hometown, to add iodine to the salt. And as a result, IQ went up 15 points in much of the United States, and income went up by 11% in these areas as well. So it's about
Jeez.
salt, iodine in the
Yeah, I'd
salt.
always heard it was like taking lead out of gasoline and stuff like that. But yeah, man, that must be salt, iodine. It's wild.
Okay. How do you feel, man? Like subjectively?
It's weird. Like, I know you were probably just teeing this up to be like a short answer, but sometimes I feel like a 15-year-old and other times I feel like a 40-year-old, but it just depends on what the context is. Like in your head, like I could go run 10 miles. Like, no, I cannot. I was like, but it just depends. It's not about your age, it's about how old you feel, kind of thing. I don't know. That's a trite expression.
I think it's accurate. I kind of vacillate between like thinking that I know everything and knowing nothing. So I guess that's similar of being like 15, thinking you know everything, and like being like 19 and knowing nothing. Right.
Yeah.
But this study on subjective age found that people in their 20s feel slightly older than their true age. People in their 30s still feel about their mid 20s. 40-year-olds feel about 30. 50-year-olds feel like they're in their late 30s, and 70-year-olds feel like they're about 50.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think there's got to be some truth to that because, yeah, like I remember thinking a lot about like processing all the stuff. Like, I think there's a part of it which is like you just don't process what's happening to you now. You only process what
Yeah.
happened to you in the past. And so I feel like I'm just getting over like what happened in my mid 20s now.
the trauma is still
Yeah.
affecting you.
So, I'm just getting past that, and that's why it must feel that way. Yeah, that's interesting.
Repress all those grad school memories of hours spent.
When like entry level jobs and
Oh
bullshit
god.
work and all the
Oh
stuff you have to
god.
do as a part of that.
I mean, there's probably some selection bias. There has to be on the later end of like 70-year-olds, like because the tail starts getting thinner at that age. But yeah, I kind of sympathize with the results, and I think to your point, like people probably feel younger, like the health is better and these sort of things. So who knows?
This is totally random.
Yeah.
I was driving by, what do you call them, like assisted living place the other day, and they like rebrand themselves now as like exciting living place, and the poster outside it said like for any exciting living individual who's 58 years old or plus can come live here. And I was like, 50-year-olds aren't living in assisted living places, as far as I'm concerned. Like, who are these people? It's like if you're 50, you're probably not, you're still like living your life and working all the time. Who's this assisted living person?
Maybe they got it figured out. It looks like a pretty sweet lifestyle. You got like a built-in friend group, you got some activities, little
Yeah.
volleyball. I don't know what they do.
Yeah, you better like people that are 20 to 30 or 40 years older than you as your friends.
Well, I mean, there is the assisted living sort of apartments for these like 20-year-olds. It's like geared for like the 20-year-old or like the 25-year-old young people's apartments. Is they have like activities and this sort of thing, and like you go through life, and then when you get older, you got like the old people assisted living home where they have activities and this sort of thing.
Yeah, I've heard like people live on cruise ships and stuff like that. I guess it must be like that.
I'm intrigued by the cruise. Have you ever been on a cruise?
Yeah, I've been twice. I mean, there's good and bad parts. Like I think it was like one of those industries where it was of a higher quality in the past. Like I went when I was like younger, and it was like everything was nice. And now you go and it's like, this is not as nice. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, you want to talk about the coast, the best companies to coast at. This TikTok, this is from Blind. People rate their companies and like ask about where you can have great work-life balance. And so apparently Microsoft, great work-life balance. Costco, people rarely get fired from Costco, so go work there. They claim that JP Morgan is basically retirement on duty. LinkedIn, apparently a retirement home. They also mentioned American Express, IBM, and Cisco.
That's such a strange employee value proposition. Like, hey, is your life's work done somewhere else? Come here because you've already peaked. Like, what?
I mean, like, I guess people are looking for different things. Like if you are looking for a place where it's like not going to be a huge challenge, or if you just want to kind of like do your thing and move on.
Would you say that, the kind of pay that you get in that type of job is proportional to the problem size that you need to fix?
No, you're quoting Elon Musk there. No. I think that your pay would probably be a little bit less because you're probably fewer expectations.
Well, and that was the whole premise on the everyone gets paid the same article. See, that's another callback to a while ago. But everybody's looking for a job where they get paid a lot but don't have as much heartache. And so I guess those companies are the companies you should be looking for until they go out of business.
Unsolicited feedback. So there's a funny TikTok of a young, probably Gen Z, probably or late young millennial, talking about complaining about unsolicited feedback. So she says the worst people in the world insist on giving you feedback on problems that are not real or made up. So while working at Google, a woman chased her down after a meeting and told her that the color schemes on her PowerPoint slides did not have enough contrast and it did not look professional. And conclude to say, I thought that you would appreciate it because I appreciate feedback too.
Oh my gosh. I have such a visceral reaction to this. I don't know if I can talk about this in like an unbiased way.
Good.
Like people like this drive me nuts. What do you think while I process my emotions?
I can tell you're really struggling here. There's a follow-up thing we can talk about as well. I think that early in your career, you come in with some sort of expectations, and it's a way to acculturate individuals into an organization. But there is also I don't know if I go as far as say a Karen, but there is I feel the need to impart my wisdom on other people who may not want it. Granted, if you have a blue on yellow color scheme that people can't read, hey, it probably needs to be pointed out, but you don't need to pull people aside either.
Let me tell a story real quick, and I think this will illustrate why I feel the way I feel.
Okay.
I remember this was in one of my earlier career jobs. I won't say which one. And I had my boss's boss asked me to do a special project for them, which was like a big honor. And so I was like super psyched about it. And they said, I want you to look into like progressive practices of what leading companies should be doing on this XYZ topic, right? And so
Okay.
I went off, like came back like a month later with like I'd put a lot of work into this, right? And I really fancy presentation. And they were like, you just kind of missed the mark here, Cole. And they were like giving me like this feedback, like, you know, and so they started putting some like things that I should consider putting in there. And so I went away for another month and I came back and I found even more cool stuff and a few of the things that they had mentioned. And they were like, all the other cool stuff I found, they're like, well, you're really just missing the mark here. Like it's like but I like these three things that you put over here. And it was the things that they had asked me to put. And so they
Yeah.
asked me to put a few more. So it came back a month later and I just put the things that they'd added a few more to. So it was like 5 different topics. And they're like, see, this is great, Cole. And I was like, oh no, you didn't want me to go do research on what was like up and coming practices on XYZ topic. You just wanted me to say what you said and say it was brilliant.
Confirmation.
Right. Yeah. I was like, this is fucking stupid. And so like people, like there's a lot of that in your career where basically they give you feedback on your color scheme, but really what they're saying is you didn't say it the way that I would have said it myself. And therefore you need to change what you're doing and just be a clone of me. Do you see where
I
I'm coming from and why that's so frustrating?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There is some element of like, we're looking for specific things and this sort of thing. But if you want like true innovation and you want to understand best practices across the field, well, these are them. I understand where you're coming from as well.
Yeah, no kidding.
This young lady goes on to talk about quarterly performance reviews. Which sound like she's essentially saying like, well, now you got an opportunity for these, leaders and everyone else just to whip your ass with like a more information, and like quarterly performance reviews sound like a brutal thing. If you got to like write some sort of elements and like, oh god, sounds like an absolute beating.
Quarterly performance reviews, that is way too often. I mean, I guess in certain roles, maybe highly transactional roles, you may even need like daily performance reviews just because of the nature of the work. But most knowledge worker jobs, the performance is judged over a longer horizon of time. And so the fact that you would need to do, not to mention the administrative burden of
Yes.
doing this.
Yes.
And this is the one I always harp on, is that they've done meta-analyses of performance feedback, and it shows that over a third of the time, performance feedback actually lowers future performance going forward. So if you're doing them quarterly, you're just flipping the dice that many more times that it's going to go to negative.
The administrative burden is real. I worked at a company briefly that had these quarterly reviews, and you had to write like 2 or 3 pages about what you did that quarter. And oh my god, just a complete waste of time. Absolute waste of time. Here, you want another hot opinion on performance reviews?
Sure.
Only the top and the bottom should get a performance review. If you're in the middle, just have a nice day. Unless you want one.
Well, and so this gets into a point where I think we actually talked about this one time on an episode, and then the audio quality got screwed up, and so we had to scrap it for whatever reason. But we talked about performance reviews, and I have like so many thoughts on this. But performance reviews are tied to compensation often. And
Yes.
so it's really a compensation review, not a performance review. And therefore, if you're in the middle of the bell curve or whatever you want to say, yeah, you shouldn't probably have that conversation, but you have to if that person wants to get a raise. Right. And so that's not necessarily the, like if you consult any research on performance and how you should do it, it's like if you're going to give a reward for something, the reward has to be tied directly to the behavior. It needs to follow directly after the behavior and not have a time lag in between when the reward is given and when the behavior occurs. I mean, that's textbook behavioralism, right? And we've known this for 100 years, something like that. And so it's like organizations are just patently trying to do things that are going to be counterproductive when it comes to performance.
Tying the political aspect of it, i.e. the compensation to it, is totally apt. We also know that only the top and the bottom can be reliably rated as far as their performance. People in the middle just kind of inconsistent ratings all over the place.
Oh yeah, which makes doing things like stack ranking really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have some tricks to make people like you, Cole?
I would love some tricks to make people like me.
Okay, it's called third person attribution. If you're talking to someone and say something good about that third person, the attributes will be ascribed to you. Say like, oh, Tim, he has great energy. That person will think that you have great energy.
Oh, well, our previous guests are very handsome.
The bad news is I couldn't actually find this effect in a very quick Google search. I could find third person effect, which you feel that others are more swayed by media or propaganda than you are. It's not the same
Oh
at
yeah.
all. But I could not find this third person attribution effect. The other
Yeah,
one is
it does not sound real, I'll be honest with you, but that
It's
does bring up the point. Have you ever heard of we've talked about it before on the podcast, but Gelman amnesia?
boy, this doesn't ring a bell at all. Maybe I have amnesia.
This is a while, but this goes way back. But it's this concept that if you read something in like a newspaper or like a authoritative source, most of the time about a subject for which you're an expert, you'll realize like all of these flaws in it. It's like the person who's writing it really doesn't understand the topic, and they're oversimplifying and all this kind of stuff. We're oftentimes just plain wrong. And then you read the next story about something you're not an expert, and you take it as gospel.
Yeah.
Right. And it's called Gelman amnesia because that article likely has as many flaws as the one that you're an expert on, but you're just not an expert. And so you just don't know that.
Did you ever have the experience in grad school where like you pick up a topic for the first time, you pick up an article and you think that this article is just like the absolute gospel, and then you like dig deeper, and you realize, oh, that first article was like kind of trash actually.
Yeah, but it's the first one. Like, how would you know any better?
You wouldn't.
You know, got to give yourself a break. Get a Twix.
How about this? Hey, would you give me a Twix?
I would if I had one. Yeah.
Oh, thanks,
and you were
man.
in the same room as me.
Oh, beautiful. This is called the Ben Franklin effect. That is, people like you more when they do you a small favor. So like asking for a pencil or perhaps a Twix or this sort of thing. Yeah, the person will like you more. Just doing a little favor for you.
I have heard this. And I actually heard that to extend the Ben Franklin thing, when Ben Franklin would move to a new house, he would always go ask each one of his neighbors for like a cup of sugar or something. And because it would initiate the concept of reciprocity. So now he would owe all his neighbors something, and therefore he would have good relationships with each of them because he was already always in their debt.
Interesting. So like I fully believe this. You are essentially developing a social connection there.
Yeah.
I never thought about the debt aspect of it, but yeah, you're already like.
Yeah, I think that might be a Cialdini thing from the influence research that he's done. I want to say it came through that some way.
Super fascinating.
Dude, if we could get him on the podcast, oh my God, that would be amazing.
He's got a lot of good network analysis research. I'd love to have him on. One last one. Are you prepared for Woman's Winter?
Oh no. Is this what I think it is?
It is not. It is not. However, Women's Winter does, ironically coincide with Hot Girl Summer. This is where air conditioners are too low in offices and all the women have to cover up in shawls and stuff. It's a funny TikTok I saw.
I thought we were going a totally different direction.
The look on your face. I know where you think we're going, but we're not going.
I know. There. I was like, this is happening. This is the moment. This is my nightmare.
No, we talked about this with Jordan Hartley some time ago. Women are colder in the office and they believe it lowers actual performance. And so there's like external environmental factors that could be.
I don't know if we mentioned this on the episode with her, but like there's research about a lot of these topics, and you also see stuff about like bias in the workplace and how things might be biased against one gender or another.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of the AC just being set at lower temperatures had to be what came into effect when the workplace was more male dominated and men had to wear suits, because suits are hot. Like they're really hot. Oh. And I wonder if the ACs were naturally set lower because of that. And then as women entered the workplace more and more, the AC didn't change. And so it was like systematically, affecting their performance in a negative way.
Interesting, especially like 70s, 80s when,
Yeah.
suits are more prevalent.
Like you could probably test this because like I think suits are still worn more in like investment banking than like the tech industry. And I wonder if like the AC is colder in investment banks than it is in tech companies or something. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to test this.
How do you feel about required dress codes?
I mean, there's certain circumstances where they're helpful. Like, have you ever
Mhm.
been to like a Target and the worker's not wearing a Target shirt? And then you're like, do they work here? Can I ask them for help? Like, in that case, I'm like, yes, please wear some sort of signifier that you work here. But like in terms of like, should everybody, I mean, outside of the military, I guess, should everybody have to wear like the same thing? Generally speaking, in knowledge work, I don't see really the purpose of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And when I go to Target, I definitely wear my red shirt and khakis just to confuse people,
It's like
but
you're gonna get a lot of questions.
misguided answers. I've worked at a couple of places that had a dress code policy, and not a massive fan, but I understand it as well. Kind of part of the culture.
Well, that's interesting. Have you noticed? Because again, I'm still a work from homey kind of guy. Have dress codes changed since the pandemic? My loose understanding is I think people have gotten more casual, but have you noticed that?
I should think so, and I think there's lots of elements there. Whether it's I've never had anybody tell me what I can wear here. I'm sure that there's some sort of policies of like, you can't wear a shirt with a middle finger on it, or any sort of like crazy outfits, clearly. But I think that I think the pandemic hastened a more casual atmosphere. I think that sort of the old guard that did grow up going to jobs and needing a, three-piece suit or even business casual, I think they're sort of being aged out of the workforce as well. And we're just
Yeah.
seeing a more sort of casual injection
I remember
from younger
seeing something
employees.
a few years ago that because of the casual nature of work, like suit manufacturers and companies that sell like high-end suits are like really struggling now. And so I bet you they would love it if we went back to all wearing three-piece suits.
Do you have a high-end suit?
Yes, kind of. I remember I remember coming across this probably 10 years ago, one of those kitschy articles. It's like 100 things to do if you're, a
Before you're 30.
successful professional. I remember one of them was buy a tuxedo when you're 25 and stay that size. And I was like,
Okay,
that's
if you can do that, you got a lot of things going right.
and I was like, yeah, man, I would love to stay the size of 25, but and not to mention, like imagine you're 50 years old and you're wearing a 25-year-old tuxedo. It probably looks a little dated, even if you haven't grown in size.
I've seen some of my sister's prom photos from like the late 80s, and like, oh my God, yeah. Imagine like trying to
Yeah.
pull off this, especially a tuxedo, if you really want a tuxedo. I do have a high-end tailored suit, which I don't wear other than to weddings and funerals. What I do wish I did when I was like 22 is like buy a high-end like stormtrooper outfit. And therefore you got a built-in Halloween costume every year. You can throw a lei on there if you want to like change it up, put a sticker on it if you want to do something else. You just like set.
That's very practical of you, Scott.
It's almost like I want to wear the same outfit and not have to think about it.
It's almost like you have the mentality of a stormtrooper in addition to the garb of a stormtrooper.
Well, I think it's all about effort, right? Effort and performance.
It is all about effort and performance. Do you want to say anything more about that, Scott?
I feel like I've been setting these up quite a bit, but it's a really great article. Work effort, a conceptual and meta-analytic review. It's a great question. Like, is effort related to performance? Are they the same thing? We had this conversation, you and me, before a pod one day, and this article essentially argues that no, they're separate entities.
I just wanted to point out, I think the first author's name is Chad H. Van Idingy.
Yeah, I didn't
So
want to go for that.
yeah, I knew you were going to struggle with that one. Another favorite of ours, Herman McGinnis, is one of the co-authors. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting that if you combine multiple types of effort together into a single construct and then show the relationship between that construct and job performance, there was only a 0.37 correlation in meta-analytic studies, which for social sciences is pretty high, to be fair. But that shows that, 63% of the variance is accounted for by other things. And so that there's a pretty distinct difference between what constitutes effort and what constitutes performance. And I think it really gets into a larger discussion of what matters more. Is it effort or is it results?
Yeah, I think that like some of the benefit here is like get a little bit deeper thinking on what effort actually is. So is it just like physical going for it, and like digging deep? Is it the amount of time you spend on something? So like duration of time? Is it subjective? Like I spent more effort on this today, or is it differences between people? Like Cole spent more effort than Scott did today.
If you look at it, I think it actually came from a tweet from Adam Grant. And he said, I'm seeing a growing number of students complain, my grade doesn't reflect the effort I put into the course.
Yeah.
He said, public service announcement, you don't get an A for effort, you earn it by excellence. Success is measured by the level of mastery you show, not how hard you work. We were talking about performance reviews earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I know most companies take kind of a bifurcated approach of they reward behaviors and outcomes, right? So they're saying, hey, your effort matters and also the output of that. But I think as you move up the pyramid in the organization, those results become much more skewed to outcomes than they do to effort. Like nobody cares if the CEO of XYZ company, they really tried hard this quarter, but sales got cut in half. They really just don't care. They only care about the outcome, which is how are we going to deal with the fact? And investors can be quite punitive in terms of how are we going to deal with the fact that the sales got cut in half. It's all about the outcome.
Yeah, I think that it is like kind of a duplicitous sort of system there. So like if you were hiring a plumber, you don't really care if it takes them 5 minutes or 5 hours. You just want your sink fixed, right? And on the other hand, especially in knowledge jobs, we reward people for engaging in the right behaviors. So leadership behaviors, you meet with your employees. Are you, taking care of these other aspects, administrative tasks, some sort of like, whatever else is going on. Because to your point, there's so many factors that influence overall performance that are out of your control, but you need to reward those actual behaviors for engaging in them.
I'm curious. Did you ever find a Waffle House for us to waffle on?
We didn't get very far here, but can we just do like the final findings of the study?
Okay. Sorry.
Effort is about what workers do and how hard they try to do those things. In contrast, performance is about how effectively and efficiently workers do those things. Thus, effort is necessary, but insufficient for performance.
I couldn't have said it better.
There you
I
go.
totally agree with that.
We ain't gonna pay for that. We need some actual Waffle House up in here, right?
We need that waffle.
This is the first one I see. Would you rather travel forward or backwards in time?
I mean, I feel like this is sort of an easy one. I mean, maybe this is my own bias and why I should be better at waffling. But I'm not. Backwards in time, you know what you're getting into. Forwards in time, you do not. Like, what if you go forwards in time and there's been like a nuclear apocalypse? It's like, and then you show up right in the middle of it.
Oh yeah.
Like, well, I guess we're dead now. But if you go backwards in time, you can go find out who killed JFK or go kill baby Hitler or whatever it is that you're trying to do to go backwards in time, or maybe don't break it off with that person that was your first love, or whatever it may be.
So you're saying like you'd rather go back in time to influence history, which would set you off on like another side history, which may change everything.
Like, I don't know if I'm going to take the bait on this whole sci-fi narrative of like alternative histories and am I warping space-time? The premise of the question was you could go backward, you could go forward. Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a different perspective.
No, I'm curious. So you're saying you'd rather go backwards in time, see all these events.
Like it's there from a uncertainty reduction standpoint. I would absolutely go backwards because the future, you're going to go 100 years, you're going to go 5 years, you're going to go 1,000 years. Like, how do you even know what you're getting into? Right. Whereas going backwards, you could find a specific time and place and you would know exactly what you're getting into.
I mean, this is exactly what H.G. Wells deals with in The Time Machine, where like you go a little bit in the future and then like all of a sudden the machine goes out of control and you're just in like a wilderness, like the civilization's collapse. It's just a jungle. We've reverted back to primitive states. Overall, I would say take me to the future. The past seems like it fucking sucks. Like the Roman times is brutal, a lot of disease, you dying at age 30.
Yeah.
There's no TikTok, there's no bathrooms. It
Oh,
sounds
dude.
terrible.
Yeah, my caveat is if I'm going to the past, I need toilet paper, antibiotics, and maybe like a tomahawk or something to make sure that I make it out alive.
Oh, there's a great comedian. He has a good bit about like if I went back in the past, I'm not sure I could convince anybody that I'm actually from the future because they'd want to know. Like you'd be like, "Here's my cell phone," and be like, "How's it work?" You're like, "I have no idea. I have no idea." Or like, "Who's gonna
Well,
be the next president?" Be like, "I don't know."
just say Calvin Coolidge. You're probably right. You never know.
I could be convinced. I could be convinced to go to the past. There are things that
Yeah.
I'd love to see, but the future. Let's see what the future holds.
Is it nerdery time?
Yeah, let's do it. We're surprising each other today with a bunch of things, really. So
Yeah, if that's not clear to
yeah,
those who are listening, we do not know it. Well, speaking of stuff that you don't know what's coming, found an article in Psych called "A Simulation of the Impacts of Machine Learning to Combine Psychometric Employee Selection System Predictors on Performance Prediction, Adverse Impact, and Number of Drop Predictors," by Richard Landers and a few other folks from University of Minnesota.
that's a mouthful.
And it was really interesting because first of all, they had some crazy high sample sizes, like 1.2 billion data points or something like that. It was crazy. But one of the things that they found, and it was sort of prescient for the age that we're in, about like people making claims that machine learning is going to revolutionize employee selection. They actually found that the predictive models that they built only got better the number of predictors they dropped out of the model. And that led to evidence supporting that more unsophisticated models for predicting performance, not needing machine learning, was actually had higher efficacy than these advanced machine learning models, because again, although their prediction could be higher, that they didn't scale, they didn't replicate over time, that there was a strong atrophy there. I thought that was a really interesting finding, considering a lot of the claims that I've seen over the last few years that machine learning is going to revolutionize this space.
That is interesting. There is the element of like just adding new predictors also creates like an operational burden to actually collect those data points. Or, there's so many times that, I see systems just get deprecated and, who knows what that data is feeding into, et cetera. But it is also interesting that I guess our performance ratings are so variable that just a few predictors are doing just as good of a job as a ton of them.
Well, I mean, think of it like we've talked about kind of the power law on here a few times in relation to performance.
Yeah.
It's probably a few predictors that are doing the heaviest lifting of model performance versus many of the others. And therefore, machine learning models that are, using like a ridge or a lasso regression or something like that, that has thousands of lowly correlated variables together, is probably not adding any additional insights because of the whole power law.
Absolutely. And go back to what we were talking about earlier, that only the top and bottom can be reliably rated. So you have a big chunk of people in the middle who are just kind of all over the place. So that's going to be like really tough to tease out. But, you switch it to like some sort of like binary classification of top and not top.
Yep.
Maybe it improves. I don't know, but that's less useful. Clearly, if you want to make compensation choices, all those sort of things.
Yeah, just leave alone the middle 80%. That's probably a good rule of thumb.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. And I think there's like more room for, say, like lasso regression in our analyses that we don't really get into as well. So dropping out these variables, or at least letting them go down to zero, just to identify the most important ones. We don't talk about that very much.
You got anything for nerdery?
I do. This article is called "Scared for the Rest of My Career: Career-Long Effects of Abusive Leadership on Professional Athlete Aggression and Task Performance." So the study essentially finds that between 17 and 33% of all men's college basketball coaches exhibit abusive leadership traits, and the negative impacts created by a bad boss outweigh the positive effects of a good boss. This research demonstrates that exposure to abusive leadership influence both the trajectory of task performance and psychological aggression over an NBA player's careers. So, those with abusive coaches performed at a lower level. Player efficiency rating is how they classified that, and they had more technical fouls over their career. And this effect lasted 10 years over the player's career. So, kind of interesting phenomenon that just having a bad boss may like taint your entire sort of trajectory. Have you ever had a abusive boss?
I mean, I don't know if I'd have anything that would like fit like a legal standard of abusive, but I had some people that, I wasn't fond of for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had an abusive boss. I've had bad bosses before, definitely,
Yeah.
but micromanaging sort of types. But
Yeah, I remember like playing sports as a kid. My biggest issue is I'm really hard headed.
no,
And so like no, never would have suspected that. I want to learn things myself is what I realized it comes down to. And so like my coach would want to tell me to do something differently, and I'd be like, let me figure it out myself. But it came across as like, no, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And yeah, got a lot of not lashings, but like verbal, not niceness from that.
Cole's not a team player on the third grade baseball team.
Yeah, especially when your dad's the coach. That's tough.
Oh
But, yeah.
no! Oh no! I never had that situation.
No, my dad was a good coach, actually.
It is interesting. Like one of the quotes that they have in here is something to the effect of like the best time to get rid of an abusive leader is yesterday. The next best time is today. You know what I really want to know? Like we never really got to cover it, but like, is a hammock a chair? Like I don't know. I don't know if we
People
ever.
will have no idea where this reference is coming from.
They won't, but I've been perseverating on it.
So I come down pretty strongly on this. And since you brought it up, I do want to come back to what is a wallet and what's a backup wallet, but let's table that for a second.
Okay.
And the most important of it, what's a flat sheet, but we'll make that third. All right.
There's a lot to cover here.
There's a lot of hard-hitting stuff for us to pontificate on. I do not think a hammock is a chair. I absolutely think it is a sleeping receptacle for people to lay down. How often do you lay down in a chair?
Well, I mean, you get those like sweet ones that like recline and stuff, I suppose, but
those are called a recliner. It's like in their name.
it's like a recliner chair, though, right? I'm not trying to be like obstinate here, like because I too believe that a hammock is not a chair unless it's like one of those like weird like hammock chairs, like hybrid sort of.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Like
yeah,
that is a chair. Yes.
Is a hammock like even comfortable? I don't know. I haven't been in a hammock in years.
So okay, now we're getting into the real stuff. Hammock, comfortable in theory, not comfortable in practice. Right? It is like especially if you're like me, where you have like an oddly shaped body, where like your weight distribution is not equal. If you have a non-weight distribution equal body, a hammock is, and you got to have immense core strength to get this thing to just sit straight.
I see people like sleeping in hammocks and like out in the sun, and more power to them, but that's not my life, man. I don't know. I'm not a napper either. I'm not a relaxer. I don't enjoy it.
I am a napper.
Unintended.
I mean, I want to like a hammock. I think that's why I get frustrated by it. Is I want to like it so bad, and then I get in an actual hammock, and it always disappoints me.
I want to be a hammock person as well. Maybe when I retire.
Like and I'll add an addendum to that with beanbag chairs. Like beanbag chairs in theory look amazing. I would love to sit in a beanbag chair. I sit in them and it's like, this is not comfortable. And you know what violates this notion, because I actually don't like the way they look, but they're incredibly comfortable, is Adirondack chairs. Adirondack chairs look like they're incredibly uncomfortable because they're just wood and perfectly straight at angles. It's like, oh, that's got to be uncomfortable. And you sit in it, it's like, oh, this is amazing.
The problem with the Adirondack chair isn't sitting in it and being comfortable. It's getting out of the Adirondack chair because that same angle like prohibits you from like actually standing up.
You're right, but yeah, sometimes you just got to get over it.
You're like, hey, I'm here for 4 hours. I got a cooler next to me, and that's the way life is.
Adirondack chairs are like the British children of resilience. Like they're going to teach you how to get up properly and have a thicker skin.
Or just stick there. That's your lot in life. I'm an Adirondack person, and I'm not leaving because I can't.
All right, so tell me this, Scott. Why would one person have a backup wallet that doesn't serve as their primary wallet?
Okay. So this goes back to a story of this morning where, as opposed to grabbing my wallet and phone out of a little valet I have by the front door, I grabbed both my wallet and my backup wallet, and no phone. So I am rolling phoneless right now, which is totally uncomfortable feeling, all the horrible things. But I went through a period of probably 12 straight years of having a wallet, a nice leather wallet, and it got that like kind of great sort of like molded to your body, like leather feel. It's like kind of slick and like just like perfectly molded. And eventually it crapped out. And then for the past like 5 years, I've been going through a variety of different wallets, testing them out, trying to work it out. I think I finally have one I like now, but now I got a bunch of wallets laying around the house, and I collect a bunch of different little cards that I want to retain, such as travel cards for like Metro, like all over, the US or the world. So when I do go back, like I don't know what to do with it. I can't keep in my regular wallet. So I have a backup wallet and I stick all that crap in there, or like credit cards that I don't use, they go in there. And so I have a wallet and a backup wallet with all my other stuff in there. So like my global entry card that goes in the backup wallet until I need it. My old driver's license, if I ever need it.
I guess the question I have for you, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but the question I have for you is, do you think this like the median individual out there, are they struggling with the wallet and backup wallet problem?
It is definitely first world problem for sure. I think that's where you're going.
I've never even heard of somebody having a backup wallet till this morning.
Well, what's your wallet situation? What do you do?
I have a wallet. When it gets worn out, I buy a new wallet. One and only wallet, much like, the one ring to rule them all from Lord of the Rings, Like I don't have a backup ring.
You don't have like a bunch of cards that you might need someday, and just
no. Like
it is fair. One of my travel things is to collect like subway or transit pass cards from wherever I go. It's like one of my little
and that's an interesting and idiosyncratic thing that maybe you can make a scrapbook from, and that would be cool and interesting. I'm just, I guess, too utilitarian and practical. I just need one wallet and that's all I need.
That's fair. Like gonna go to London, grab my Oyster card. Gonna go to Miami, grab whatever card that is. Got my Boston card, Chicago, bam, bam. And they all
have a subway system.
They do. It's actually okay. A little transit thing, train. I don't think it does not go to South Beach, which is where I would hang out the most time.
You want to talk about flat sheets, or you want to wrap this up?
I think we got to talk about flat sheets. Why not? Let's just annoy everyone to death with flat sheets. Hey, Cole, do you use a flat sheet?
I didn't even know what a flat sheet was until you brought this up there.
So for everyone's edification, we brought this up in a pod that did not get released. It died on the vine, as it were, technical issues or what have you. But this was one of the things posed, like, do you use a flat sheet? So a flat sheet would be that second sheet, right? And it feels very ostentatious to actually use a flat sheet.
You're still being way too ambiguous. The second sheet for what?
Oh, for your bed.
For your bed. So you would have a comforter. You have a bed sheet that is, in this case, called a flat sheet. And the question was posed, are you a flat sheet person or not a flat sheet person? And I'm like,
do you have strong opinions on the flat sheet?
Well, flat sheets are perfectly fine. Like, I just call them bed sheets. But it was like a words and terms problem. Like, what are we talking about?
You
And
have
if I
these,
remember correctly, are you like a non-comforter person? You only use the quote unquote flat sheet?
well, I'm not a psychopath, first off, so let's not even test this no comforter action here. Uh, so the flat sheet goes in between the mattress sheet and the comforter. So it's like that's that middle layer. And
Yeah.
like some people get under it, you know. I might do it at a hotel, but
So okay, all right, what is a psychopath again? Is this a person who uses a flat sheet and no comforter, or a person who uses a comforter and no flat sheet?
oh man, so like you're painting me to a corner here because like in Seattle, you got to use the comforter, but like my parents, they're getting older. They leave the place like 85 degrees. You
Oh,
got to
God.
kick the comforter off and just go with the
Yeah.
flat sheet, just to have something on top of you. But under
So you're
normal
saying your
normal
parents are forcing
circumstances,
you to be a psychopath? Is that what you're saying?
they can be. They can be. You know, desperate
Okay.
times call for desperate measures, you know.
Well, that clearly, I mean, I think we figured out what, sent like Ted Bundy overboard is his parents kept the house too hot and had to take that comforter off, and then he started murdering people.
Well, I mean, as opposed to women's winter, that's men's summer, I think, right? Just want to bring it full circle.
Are we doing it? Is this where it happens?
No, you're still worried about this. Shout out to Cardi B out there, everybody.
Let's wrap this guy up. Scott, it's been great talking to you. I think we covered a lot of ground in this episode. We definitely laughed more than 10 times, and that's a good thing. I don't know. Any final words before we go?
Sorry, we'll do better next time.
I feel like a lot of the Cole and Scott episodes end the same way.
They do.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and thank you for listening.
As always, all opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott.